Welcome to Live the Dream with yours truly, Marty Kaiser. Buckle up and let's get started. Happy Friday, everyone. This is Marty Kaiser with our latest Real Estate Tidbits podcast. Hope everyone is having a great week. We've got some warm weather today. Should be hopefully a nice weekend. Today we're going to cover a few different topics. I thought I would start off today, obviously, about real estate. We're going to break it down into two diverse segments. One segment is going to be some big real estate news in terms of how this could impact the industry from a national level. And the other thing is going to be looking at real estate in 2025 for the individual. And so let's get started with the national thing. Well, two big pieces of information have come out in the past week. They're not 100% confirmed in terms of you can take it to the bank, but they're pretty creditable, and assuming they don't run into a lot of regulatory headaches, these two changes should take place in 2025. The first one is Rocket Companies has made an acquisition agreement with Redfin Real Estate for about $1.75 billion to acquire Redfin in an all-stock deal. So what does that mean? Well, as you may or may not know, the Rocket companies, which have Rocket Mortgage and a few other divisions, they're the largest lender in the United States. And they do a lot of marketing, and they do obviously a lot of business. So their theory in acquiring Redfin's a national real estate company who's best known for its technology. They have a very high-performing website. They're one of the top 3 real estate websites in the country for people viewing them. And Redfin's a big general real estate company. They've expanded quite a bit over the past 5 years. So they're a significant player in the real estate business. Well, Rocket's feelings and the reason for their acquisition, they feel it'll be a good corporate fit, but more importantly, from Redfin's point of view, they've done a lot of income modeling, and they feel that this is going to increase their overall profit margin and income astronomically. They feel this way due to the synergistic effect of the acquisitions, meaning they're going to take the bundling services one step further than they've been. For those of you that follow real estate, one of the things that a lot of consumers don't like is they would deal with one real estate agent for the actual real estate portion, the buying and selling of real estate. But along with that, if they're a buyer, they have to find a mortgage company that they do business with. Of course, the agent recommends companies and usually has a relationship with a company that they're more comfortable in working with, but it's not an official relationship. And so the customers may want someone that's more tied in. Same thing holds true with title insurance as well. Every transaction that is involved in real estate needs title insurance, which is typically paid for on a mortgage transaction by both buyers and sellers. It depends on the part of Florida as to who pays what, in the sense that in the metropolitan Orlando, Central Florida area, the sellers typically pay for the owner's title policy, where in South Florida, for example, the buyers pay for a title policy. It's just a custom of those geographic areas. But Rocket Mortgage is heavily involved in title insurance. So their theory and objective is they're going to try to sell this to the consumer, that it's going to be an easier transaction for the consumer, because the consumer will kind of have all-in-one services. They will probably offer some type of reduced expenses to the consumer in a transaction in terms of their closing cost, And obviously their selling feature is going to be if they can save the consumer a significant amount of money in a transaction, it's going to give them an advantage in terms of acquiring new customers. Plus, from the consumer's point of view, everybody likes saving money if they can maintain the same level of service. That, of course, remains to be seen, but this is the theory. And, of course, you can imagine if Rocket has all these additional revenue sources, it's going to expand their consumer base, and it's going to significantly expand their profitability. So it's going to be interesting to follow that. The only thing that could hold this up is if for some reason the Justice Department gets involved and feels it's reducing competition or an antitrust violation. It remains to be seen if that's going to happen. The Justice Department, during the new administration, it's hard to tell how they're going to act, so we'll kind of leave that open to following that. But that is a very interesting development and could change the balance of power in real estate. The second big news when it comes to acquisitions and mergers is Compass Real Estate, which again is a big national player, and they've been one of the most aggressive companies over the past 10 years in expanding and acquiring other companies. Of course, their profits many years have not been that significant. They've been operating at a loss for many years in order to expand. And they've done some things which some people liked and some criticized them for. For a good period of time, they were recruiting agents and offering big sign-on bonuses, which obviously agents liked, and they were going after the high-producing agents. But then on the flip side, there's been many documented cases where when the agents started, they ended up being disappointed in the operation of Compass or the culture, whatever they were seeking that they didn't find that they sought, that they received out of that, and they ultimately left Compass. Well, some of these agents unfortunately didn't have attorney representation and didn't scrutinize their contracts very, very well. So if they left within a certain time frame of signing up with Compass, they were having to repay a lot of their sign-on bonus. And in many cases, they didn't budget that, and it caused a significant financial hardship to them. But that was in the past. I don't think that's occurring currently. And Compass has continued to grow, especially with their agent count. So who they're trying to acquire now is Warren Buffett's real estate company. Among his multi-billion-dollar holdings, he's owned the division that you may have referred to as Berkshire Hathaway. They were under the corporate umbrella of Home Services. And they're a good-sized company, too, on a national basis. Just to give you an idea of statistics from 2023 per data from Real Trends, Compass held the title of the largest U.S. brokerage by volume, and Home Services was ranked fourth largest in 2023. So you can imagine that the marriage of these two companies would solidify their position as being the largest entity in the general real estate market. So that should be interesting to see if these deals go through. They're both expected to go through somewhere in the second half of 2025. So it's always interesting to keep your eyes on these developments. For many consumers, it's not going to have an impact, but for some, they may end up deciding to use this as part of their decision making. I've always felt that the individual agent that you deal with is the most important thing. But obviously, if you get a top agent with a top company, you have the best of both worlds. So that's a little bit about some of the comings and goings of corporate real estate. Now, the second part of my real estate discussion is basically relating to all the uncertainty that we're all facing in the first quarter of 2025. If you watch the news at all or read the news or go online, you know that we're in a high state of volatility right now. We had a change of presidential administrations. We have possible recession forecast in our economy. We continue to have higher interest rates. But probably what's caused the most uncertainty and a lot of the anxiety for people is the major changes that the current president and his administrative staff is trying to impose on the way that we do business in the United States. And these changes are huge if they all go through. The one that's getting the most publicity and that could have the most potential on business and is creating the most anxiety are the tariffs. And the unusual thing about the tariffs are we're going after our allies and domestic partners in addition to going after what you would consider our competitors or people that do business or have their society in a different manner from the United States, such as the Soviet Union and China. But what's getting more publicity and a lot more scrutiny and nervousness is that we're trying to impose our will on Canada, Great Britain, and Mexico, just to name a few. And you've probably heard the president, whether he's serious or in jest, of saying he'd like to take over Canada as our 51st state, along with making some other unusual pronouncements about the objectives of the United States, such as taking over Greenland, possibly having to be more aggressive with the Panama Canal, things of that nature. But getting back to tariffs and how that affects not only our business, but real estate, these tariffs that we're talking about imposing, for the most part, are about 20 to 25% right now. And so, assuming these tariffs go into effect, our allies have already stated that they will do reciprocal tariffs against us. So it's going to, in effect, be a potential trade war. And some of the sectors of the economy that have potential nervousness, not only for the economy, but for real estate, are two things. Number one, Canada is the supplier of a lot of materials that are used in the construction of residential homes. So think about it for a second. If you're a consumer and you want to buy a new home and they're using a lot of components from Canada that have approximately a 20 to 25% tariff on them, you can appreciate the builder's kind of in a conundrum. The builder, in most cases, is probably going to pass along some or all of the cost increase of supplies, which is going to raise the cost of new home acquisition, or they can choose not to pass along much of it and just take a far smaller profit margin on their construction. Well, it's been my experience with corporations, they like making money. So I would expect it's more than likely that they'll pass along the cost increases to the consumer. Well, what does that mean? That means potentially two things. Number one, it's going to cost you more if you want to buy a new home. Number two, it's probably going to significantly impact the amount of new homes that are being sold in the United States. We've already seen trends over the last couple months of new home sales and construction being reduced. And number three, by kind of the negative component of new homes, it may actually help pre-owned or resale properties. Why is that? Well, because if new home transactions go up by a certain price, whether it's 10% or whatever is deemed appropriate by the builder, And the real estate market, as it's projected to be in 2025 on resales, has an average appreciation of 3 to 4%. Well, it makes it a lot more cost effective for a consumer to buy a pre-owned home. It's always been the case pretty much that new home construction costs more than a pre-owned, but the consumers obviously justify that because they're getting something brand new, they're getting new warranties, they're getting a new roof, they're getting a new air conditioning system, and probably the most important thing is they can select a style that exactly meets their needs. They can choose their upgrades. They can choose their colors. So there's a lot of personal benefits to a consumer buying a new home. The reason that more people haven't bought new homes in the past, relatively speaking, is because they're paying more. I know in the Orlando area, I used to tell my people, if you're looking at wanting to move into a popular area, either by location, convenience, good school systems, a safer environment for your kids, etc., the cost differential was about 15%. And that's significant. So for some people, they'd rather spend $500,000 and get a pre-owned home than spend $575,000 for the same home in a new version. But that was an individual decision. But now if we have these tariffs and the expected material price increase, that new home is going to go up from $575,000 to significantly more. It could certainly exceed the $600,000 range. And by comparison, then the new home differential to pre-owns would be over 20%. So that's a big difference, and it's something to keep a definite eye on. But here's what I'm telling my people, and I kind of modify my position too, because there's such what I would call uncertainty with all these projected changes. There's a lot of anxiety and angst by people because people like predictability. And the one thing I can safely say is right now we don't have a predictable society in the United States, and we may not have one for the next 4 years. That remains to be seen, but it's a little disconcerting for some people that like to make a plan and, not only plan their investments, they like to plan their travel. There's just a lot of things that you like to plan, and with things being so uncertain in a lot of these key sectors, it's hard to do that. Plus, with all the government cutbacks, the increased potential unemployment, services being potentially cut, they're talking about cutting Medicaid, a lot of the aid programs that we have. We could have a higher unemployment rate due to the displacement of a lot of these workers that either work for the government or have positions that highly are tied into the government. Also, we should expect less efficient services. Some of the key administrations, like the Social Security Administration and the Department of Education, they were already working on staffs that were under what they would like, and now they're talking about cutting them dramatically. I know airplane travel, I've talked to people recently that are a little bit leery of traveling. We've had a few accidents in the past 6 weeks, and now they're talking about cutting back on the air traffic controllers and some of the other things. So there's just a lot of things that keep people on edge. So what are my feelings about these things? Well, I'm going to kind of confine this to two different aspects. One is when it comes strictly to real estate. And I'm addressing this to any potential real estate customer, whether you're thinking of buying, whether you're thinking of selling, or whether you're thinking of renting. And then beyond that, are you thinking on relocating, whether it's to a different part of Florida, whether it's entirely out of state? In some cases, I've talked to people that are thinking of moving out of the country. That's how extreme some people are thinking about these changes. In any event, since we don't really know what's going on, we can kind of forecast, but nobody really has a certain forecast because there's just a lot of change going on, a lot of it's speculative. You really just have to look at your own individual situation. And what I mean by that is, can you afford to buy or sell right now? How important is it for you to buy and sell? Meaning, do you have a new addition to your family on the way and need more space? Have you outgrown your home because things have just changed over the years? Your family size has changed, or you want more space? On the flip side, are you an empty nester and don't need all the space in your house, or maybe don't want to have to worry about home maintenance as you near retirement and you're looking to downsize? Have the school systems changed for you, where you want to move out of the area you're in and go to a better school area? Or on the flip side, are you renting right now, and besides wanting to get a foothold in a long-term investment, are you trying to find a better school system for your kids, or possibly an environment that you feel more comfortable in that has less crime and things of that nature? So there's a lot of decisions that people always think about. So the point of this illustration that I'm giving is you should focus more on your own situation and not let all these unusual circumstances that are taking place in society affect you as much, because you have no control over those. But you do have control over what decision you make. And a lot of it's going to be a needs analysis. So when I say a needs analysis, I'm going to pat myself on the back a little bit and say this increases the need for you working with an experienced, knowledgeable professional in not only the real estate business, but that keeps informed on a lot of these related sectors like schools, like lifestyles, and can give you the benefit of his or her judgment because they've participated in helping people make these major life decisions, and they've also experienced different cycles. So in my opinion, the importance of a skilled, knowledgeable, well thought about, somebody that communicates well, professional, is really important. And the nice thing for you is, at least I can tell you in my situation, I offer these consulting type services and forecasts with no charge. And I don't even force you to hire me to conduct real estate. I would hope that you would, but I offer these services with no cost or obligation. And the reason that I do, from a selfish point of view, it's my way of exposing myself to more people, and hopefully I'll generate more customers. I got into the real estate business, among other reasons, to help people out. And this is a way that I can help people out. And I also try to give you the key components when you're making these major lifestyle decisions. And everybody's situation is different. So I highly recommend that you take my words to heart, and I would love to help people. And if it's not myself, then get somebody comparable to me that has the skill, background, and communication skills to help you make these life decisions. Now, on a related topic, but not as much real estate, is we're a more anxiety-ridden country, as you've probably experienced over the last few years. Anxiety is an increasingly talked about facet of society. Unfortunately, we live in a more volatile world. You know, when I went to school, we didn't have to worry about doing drills in case we had terrorism in the schools, or somebody that was potentially going into a school to shoot people. And so, can you imagine your child is in elementary school and they're having to do drills to hide under the desk? Well, that's certainly at a young age creating anxiety. Also, with people worrying about employment changes, companies and employees not having the same loyalty they used to have. So it's more commonplace for people to make career changes or change employers, whatever the case may be. Those are significant anxiety things. And then you have the divisiveness in our country to do with politics, because many people are on two opposite spectrums. And so if you talk about politics, it creates a lot of negative. There's just a lot of things that have created anxiety. Most importantly, though, is trying to keep the family structure and our kids from having this anxiety. Probably the only sector of our economy that really benefits from all this anxiety is therapists or psychiatrists, because a lot of times people need to talk to a third party about that, and they're not as comfortable talking with their families about it. And so sometimes having a neutral voice that you can sound off on and be a good listener is really an important aspect. The downside to that is, of course, these therapists cost money, and unless you have a health insurance policy that pays for that type of service, it's another expense that you have to factor in. But I think it's important that people try to come up with mechanisms to help them cope with anxiety, because anxiety doesn't go away, but you have to have a mechanism to control it, whether it's a sounding board, whether it's doing meditation, whether it's doing yoga, whether it's doing a regular exercise program to get your endorphins more active, watching your diet, not eating the type of foods or drinks that are going to spike your sugar level, which many times spike people's anxieties. There's just a lot of things involved in that. And I think these things take on more importance because anxiety is just a factor in our society nowadays. And it's something that it's important that people can get a better handle on that. I apologize for the noise in the background if you hear it. We're getting construction outside too in my Hunters Creek office complex, so that's something I didn't expect, and it just started in the last half hour. So that's my feelings about some of these real estate and lifestyle related topics. Hopefully these will give you some things to think about. And last but not least, I'll give a little blurb about sports, because I typically like to include sports in my things. The biggest thing that we're experiencing now was the NFL free agency in football. So players are coming and going. You're hearing about these major contracts for some players. On the flip side of that, you're hearing about these household names in football getting released by their teams. Even somebody famous like Aaron Rodgers, he got released by the Jets, and it's uncertain to what he's going to do in the coming year. So there's just a lot of changes. It's interesting to follow, but we really have no control over it. I think what it's done in sports, it's harder to follow your teams now because they have such a turnover of players. And I think to some degree it's interesting because teams get new players, but on the other side, the components of the teams change, so it's harder to follow them. The NBA basketball season is on its last month, so we should start the playoffs toward the latter half of April. So that's always exciting to watch. And probably the biggest news that's starting in about another week are the NCAA March Madness National Championships. The most interesting thing this year is the dominance of the Southeastern Conference. That's the conference where The home team, the Florida Gators, are in, and of course many teams in the southern states, Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia. They may set a record for teams in the tournament. They're talking about upwards of 12 teams. This arguably could be the strongest basketball conference that we've seen in modern history. So it should be exciting to watch. I don't have any predictions as of yet. I will say that if I had to give you a prediction, I think the national champion will come from one of three teams. The Duke Blue Devils, providing that their injured players are healthy, Cooper Flagg especially, he got hurt yesterday. The Florida Gators, they've just had a tremendous team and they're fun to watch. And the Auburn Tigers. So keep an eye on those three teams. Anyway, that's all for today. Please feel free to contact me if you'd like to talk more about your real estate situation. I can be reached at 407-595-9700, or my email address is marty@floridasells.com. Keep those questions coming in. We certainly welcome any kind of inquiries or new topics that you'd like covered. Be safe. Keep your anxiety to a level. Have a great weekend. Marty Kaiser out.